The laugh started before the hammer fell. Anna heard it from the back of the town hall, a dry little burst from a man near the stove, then another from somewhere closer to the front. It spread in soft waves through the room, while the auctioneer lifted a folded sheet and squinted at the next listing, as if even he was tired of saying it out loud. "Lot 17, he called. 160 acres of rock, scrub, and trouble. Folks call it Hemlock's Folly. Comes with a cave big enough for bats, ghosts, or a fool with no better options. Who'll open at $20? More laughter. Anna did not move at first. Bustian stood pressed against her skirt, his warm side firm against her leg, his ears alert, his eyes fixed on the crowd like he knew meanness when he smelled it. The hall was close with body heat, wool coats, dust, and old wood. Men shifted their boots. Women glanced once at Anna, then away. Near the front stood her father-in-law. He did not turn around. He did not have to. A week earlier, he had already said what mattered. "The boy is gone. You are no longer our concern." He had placed a small purse in her hand without looking at her face. Coins. Her husband's share, he had called it, as if grief could be measured and tied shut with string. Anna tightened her fingers around that same purse now. $20 for the land. 26 left after. A cave, a dog, and whatever strength she still had in her hands. The auctioneer lifted his chin. "Do I hear 20? Anna spoke before fear could catch up with her. 20. The room changed. It did not get louder. It got still. Heads turned one by one. The auctioneer blinked toward the back. The widow?" Anna gave one nod. Now Mr. Hemlock turned. Disbelief crossed his face first. Then came the thing underneath it. Not surprise. Contempt. The kind that had been waiting for a chance to stand up in public. Someone behind him muttered, not softly enough, "What's she buying that for?" Another answered, "Maybe she plans to milk stones." The auctioneer looked relieved more than anything. $20 from the widow. Do I hear 25? No one spoke. Outside, wind scraped dust along the steps. 20 once. Bustian leaned harder against Anna's leg. She kept her chin level. 20 twice. Mr. Hemlock said nothing. That hurt more than if he had laughed with the rest of them. Sold. The hammer struck wood. It sounded clean. Final. As Anna walked forward, the crowd made room for her in that stiff, sideways way people did when they wanted distance without admitting it. Bustian padded beside her, claws tapping the floorboards. She set the coins down one at a time. The auctioneer counted them quickly, slid the deed across, and wiped his brow with the back of his wrist. The paper felt too thin to carry so much weight. She took it, folded it once, and turned away. Mr. Hemlock watched her from the aisle. "Rock and shadow," he said. That was all. No warning, no pity, no blessing. Just judgment, trimmed down to 3 words. Anna met his eyes at last. "Then you need not miss it." It was the only thing she said to him. She left the hall with Bustian at her side and the deed tucked inside her dress. The cold air outside hit her face like a hand dipped in creek water. Behind her was the door swung shut and sealed the town back inside its own noise. The road to the property stretched 3 miles through pale scrub and low stone ridges. She walked it carrying a bedroll over one shoulder, a sack with flour and jerky over the other, and an iron skillet tied to the top with rope. Bustian ranged ahead, then circled back, then went forward again, as if checking the emptiness for her. By the time the sun bent low, she saw the mesa. It rose out of the land like a blunt knuckle, not high, but stubborn. At its base was the cave, dark and open, the mouth of it cut into limestone pale as old bone. It looked less like shelter and more like something the earth had swallowed and forgotten to close. Anna stopped several paces away. The wind moved through the brush with a dry hiss. Bustian stood beside her now, looking into the opening. This was what $20 bought. No porch, no fence, no stove, no walls already waiting to keep winter back. Only land nobody wanted and a black opening in the rock. She let out one slow breath. "Well," she said. Bustian looked up at her. "That makes two of us." She did not go inside that first night. Not yet. Instead, she made camp just beyond the mouth of the cave where she could keep one eye on the dark and one eye on the stars. She gathered scrub wood, built a small fire, and set the skillet near the coals to warm what little food she had. The flames threw light over stone and brush, then lost themselves at the edge of the opening. Inside, the darkness remained whole. Bustian lay close when she finally rolled out her bedding. And once in the night, he lifted his head and gave a low sound deep in his chest. Anna woke with her hand already reaching for the knife beside her bedroll, but there was nothing there except wind and dark and the slow, settling crack of cooling rock. She slept again after that. Not well, but she slept on her own land. At dawn, the sky turned from iron to pearl. Anna fed the fire one last stick, rubbed stiffness from her shoulders, and lifted the lantern. "Guard the door," she told Bustian. He sat at once. She stepped into the cave. Cool air closed around her first, then stillness. Not the living stillness of woods, not creek quiet or meadow quiet. This was older, a waiting kind of silence. Her lantern light struck the walls and came back dull and yellow. The chamber opened wider than she expected, then wider still, and the floor was mostly level near the front, packed earth and stone worn smooth in places. Farther in, it rose gently. Dust stirred under her boots. She listened. No rush of hidden water, no flutter of wings, no scratching overhead. Only her own breathing, the soft creak of leather, and somewhere far behind her, one faint click of Bustian's nails at the mouth of the cave. She kept walking. The lantern made a small world around her. Beyond it, shadow folded into shadow. Yet the deeper she went, the more one fact settled into her bones. Dry. Not damp, not slick, not smelling of rot or mold. Dry as stored grain. Her husband had noticed it once on a ride home from town. They had stopped on a ridge, and he had pointed with the easy, thoughtful way he used when looking at land. "Too stony for a plow," he had said. "No, but that cave's something. Dry one. If a man ever had sense enough to use it." She had almost smiled then and asked, "What man?" Now the answer was no man at all. By the time she turned back, her plan had already begun. Not a full plan, only the hard bones of one. The sheep first. Everything had to begin there. She had not wasted every coin at the auction. Before coming out, she had spent what she could spare on 10 thin sheep from a rancher, glad to sell the least promising part of his flock cheap. They would not survive winter unguarded in open brush. Coyotes would thin them. Cold would finish the rest. If she lost them, she lost her only honest chance to earn her way forward. Outside, she stood squinting into the morning light and looked from the open land back to the cave, a pen inside. There's not near the mouth where storm wind could reach them. Farther in, where stone held steady. She felt the shape of it before she saw the details. Posts, crossbeams, rope where nails ran short. A gate she could brace at night. Feed stacked dry. A place predators could not rush and weather could not flatten. Bustian rose when she came back out. "We have work," she said. The nearest stand of young timber sat almost 3 miles away in a wash where water ran after spring rains. Anna reached it by noon and set her axe against the first trunk with both hands. The blow jarred her shoulders. The second stung her palms. By the fifth, sweat slid down her back under her dress despite the cold. She was not built for speed. She knew that. And there were men in town who could have done twice the work in half the time, and then spent the evening bragging about it over coffee. But Anna had something better than quick strength. She stayed. She kept the axe rising and falling until the notch deepened, until the tree gave one dry complaint and leaned, until it went down in a crash that sent birds lifting out of nearby brush. Bustian startled, then barked once as if to claim credit. Anna laughed under her breath for the first time in many months. "Brave after the fact," she murmured. She trimmed branches, cut the trunk to length, tied rope, dragged the first log over rock and scrub by brute patience, one stop and one pull at a time. By the time she reached the cave, her hands burned, her lower back felt split with heat, and her breath came thin. Yet she left the log at the entrance and went back for another, and another. The next day she did the same, and the day after that. Time changed shape in those first days. It stopped feeling like hours and started feeling like tasks. Fell, drag, measure, dig, brace, lash. Her shovel bit only a little way into the cave floor before striking packed hardness, so she used a flat stone with a sharp edge to scrape deeper. She bored holes with a hand drill until her wrists ached. She saved every nail and used rope where she had to. When one post leaned wrong, she pulled it back out and set it again instead of pretending it would hold. Bustian kept near her always. Sometimes he slept in a patch of lantern light while she worked after sunset. Sometimes he sprang up growling at sounds she could not hear, and making her grip the hammer tighter before the cave went quiet again. On the 5th evening, the pen stood finished. It was not pretty. It was square and sturdy and honest. Anna opened the small hurdle that had held the sheep outside and drove them inward with careful steps and soft sounds. They hesitated at the dark, bunching together, white backs trembling. Then one stepped in, then another, and in a moment the whole flock had moved through the cave mouth and into the deeper chamber. Their bleating changed in there, softer, blunted by stone. Anna latched the gate and stepped back. The sheep shifted once, twice, then settled. Safe. Not forever. Nothing was forever, but safe tonight. She sat down on an overturned bucket near the wall, too tired to lower herself slowly. Her hands were blistered under the dust. There was sawdust in her hair, dirt on her cuffs, and a sharp ache between her shoulders that would be worse by morning. Still, when she looked at that rough wooden pen sitting inside the vast cave, something in her chest loosened. For weeks after her husband's death, life had felt like watching doors close from the wrong side. This did not. This looked like the first one she had built with her own hands. She cooked flatbread over a small fire near the cave mouth that night and tore bits of it off for Bustian. The sheep murmured deep inside. The dark no longer felt empty. It felt occupied, claimed. She counted her money by lantern light. $14 left. Not enough for mistakes. Not enough for laziness. Not enough to buy comfort. But enough, maybe, to keep going if she kept seeing what others missed. Well, if that thought followed her the next morning, when she walked deeper into the cave with the lantern again. She had noticed it before in passing, but now she went searching for it. Near the rear wall, where the stone narrowed and rose, a faint dampness touched one section of limestone. Not wet enough to run. Not even wet enough to shine at a glance. Just a darkened seam where moisture gathered on cool mornings and after thin weather changes. Anna stood there for a long time. One drop formed slowly, clung, and fell into dust. By itself, it meant almost nothing. By winter, it might mean everything. She crouched, touched the ground, then looked up along the wall, tracing the path the water wanted to take. Bustian whined from behind her. Anna rose and turned, lantern glow moving over the sheep, the posts, the long chamber, was the cave mouth far ahead where daylight waited like another world. A barrel, gutters, tin if she could get it. A way to catch what stone offered instead of wasting hours hauling buckets from the creek once snow came. The idea was thin, fragile, not yet real. But it held. And for the first time since the hammer fell in that crowded hall, Anna felt something more dangerous than fear. She felt the beginning of hope. 3 days later, with rope marks still fresh in her palms and the sheep sleeping secure behind their new gate, she started the long walk back toward town, already rehearsing what she would ask Mr. Davies for, and knowing every coin she spent next might decide whether the cave became a shelter or a fortress. By the time Anna stepped into Mr. Davies's store, the ache in her legs had settled so deep it no longer felt like pain. It felt like part of her. Bustian shook road dust from his coat near the door, then stood close against her calf while the room's talk thinned around them. Mr. Davies looked up from a ledger. His eyes dropped to her boots, her split knuckles, the dust ground into the hem of her dress. "You look like you've been fighting trees." "I won," Anna said. That almost earned a smile from him. Almost. "What do you need?" "A barrel," she said. "Biggest one you've got that still holds." Her gaze moved to a stack of dented metal sheets near the back wall. "And those pieces of tin, the narrow ones." That brought the smile, faint and crooked. "You building a roof on that cave?" "No." "Then what?" Anna rested one hand on the counter. "Something that catches water." "Mister." But Davies stared at her for a beat, then leaned back. "Out of stone? If I angle it right." A man warming himself near the stove gave a quiet snort. Another murmured, "Next she'll be teaching rocks to milk cows." Anna did not turn. Mr. Davies rubbed his chin. "It might work," he said at last, though his tone said he would not wager money on it. "Wouldn't be quick. Quick is not the same as useless." That earned his full glance. He named a price that made her stomach tighten. $6 for the barrel and tin. More if she wanted them delivered. "No delivery," Anna said at once. Mr. Davies nodded as if he expected no other answer. He added a small sack of salt and a few loose nails when she asked, and the total took a hard bite out of what remained in her purse. She counted out the coins carefully, while feeling each one leave her hand like a piece of winter warmth she might need later. When it was done, Mr. Davies rested both palms on the counter. "You sure about staying out there?" Anna met his eyes. "No." The honesty caught him. Then she added, "But I'm staying." He gave one slow nod and said nothing more. Getting the barrel home was uglier than she expected. She rolled it end over end across the rough ground, pushed when it caught in brush, cursed when it dropped into hollows, and leaned against it panting when the rise toward the mesa made her vision swim. Bustian circled, baffled by the noisy wooden thing that had stolen all her attention. Once he planted his paws and barked at it as if warning it to behave. "Then you haul it," Anna muttered. He wagged once and trotted on. By the time she reached the cave, the light was slanting gold, and her arms felt made of old rope. She left the barrel near the back wall, where the limestone wept, and sat on the ground for a full minute without moving. The cave breathed cool around her. The sheep shifted in their pen. Somewhere near the entrance, wind stroked the stone with a hollow sound. This was the moment foolish plans usually died. Not in public, not under laughter. Here, alone, when the cost had already been paid. Anna got back to her feet. She split leftover lengths of timber and hollowed them with axe and knife until she had crude channels. She bent the tin by hand and over her knee, shaping it into narrow guides. She hammered nails into cracks where the limestone would hold them, and wedged wood where it would not. More than once the whole mess tilted or slipped loose, forcing her to climb up and begin again. On the second afternoon, a strip of tin sliced the side of her thumb open. Blood ran down to her wrist before she wrapped it in cloth and kept going. At the bottom she set the barrel. It looked absurd. A cooper's barrel, homemade gutters, bits of tin all tucked against a damp seam in the stone like some desperate machine built by a woman half out of money and wholly out of alternatives. The first day, nothing. The second day, less than nothing. The wall looked dry enough to mock her. Anna said little. She fed the sheep, checked the lashings, scraped more moss and clay for later use, and refused to look toward the barrel every few minutes, though she wanted to. That night she lay beside the fire near the cave mouth with Bustian at her back and listened to the silence. It had changed since she first arrived. It no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like judgment deferred. Before dawn on the third day, a sound pulled her out of sleep. Small, soft. She opened her eyes. There it was again. Plink. Anna sat up so fast the blanket twisted around her legs. Bustian lifted his head at once and followed her at a run as she hurried through the cave with the lantern swinging hard in her hand. At the rear wall, one clear drop let go from the end of the gutter and fell into the barrel. Another followed, then another. It was slow enough to hurt, slow enough to make a fool out of impatience. But it was real. Anna set the lantern down and stood with both hands pressed to the rim of the barrel, staring at the small, dark pool beginning at the bottom. She laughed once under her breath, and then covered her mouth for no reason at all, as if the cave might take offense at joy spoken too loudly. Bustian pushed his nose against her wrist. "It works," she whispered. The dog thumped his tail against the dirt. That sound changed the scale of things. Not because it solved all of winter. It did not. The drip was thin. The barrel would take time to fill. But she had found water where other people would have seen only a wall. That mattered more than the first inch in the bottom of the barrel. It meant the cave was not just shelter. It was beginning to answer back. The first real frost arrived 2 mornings later, silvering the scrub and whitening the shadows at the cave mouth. Anna stood outside and watched her breath cloud the air. Beyond the mesa, the land looked scraped clean by cold. Small things vanished first. Green, insects. Birdsong at dawn. Then color itself started to thin. Winter was no longer a season ahead. It was on the road. The sheep had shelter, but Anna still did not. The main chamber swallowed heat. Every night proved it. Even with a fire near the mouth, the vastness of the cave drank warmth faster than she could make it. She needed walls inside walls, a smaller place, a tight place, something that could hold heat the way a hand holds a last match out of the wind. She chose a spot deeper in, not far from the barrel, where the floor was level and the rock wall behind it ran firm and straight. Bustian watched while she scratched out the shape with a stick. 10 feet by 12, small enough to warm, big enough to sleep, cook, and survive. She stared at the outline for a long moment. Then she began again. Was the work this time felt different from the sheep pen? That had been necessity laid bare. This was more intimate, more defiant. She was not only keeping animals alive now. She was carving out a place where her own breathing could soften at night. The logs came hard, the same as before. Cut, drag, stack, fit, lift, brace. But the rhythm shifted. She knew the land better now, knew where her boots slipped on the slope and where the best straight saplings stood in the wash. Knew which rope knots held under strain and which ones lied. Knew how to work until the exact moment before carelessness began. By late afternoon, the cave would smell of sawdust, cold stone, damp clay, and sheep. Her sleeves stayed rolled to the elbow despite the chill. Her hair came loose at the temples, but her hands grew so rough the axe handle no longer raised new blisters. When she paused, she talked to Bustian as if he were a second set of thoughts. "We need a door that closes tight." Bustian watched. "We need moss. More than that." His ears twitched. "And if I split one more board wrong, I may throw the hammer to Nebraska." He blinked once, unimpressed. The walls rose slowly. She chinked the gaps with mud from the creek bank mixed with dried moss and sheep wool too dirty to sell. It packed well between the logs and dried into a tight seam. It was ugly work, good work. By the end of each day, her nails were lined with earth, and her shoulders trembled when she lifted the cooking pot. One afternoon, while fitting the frame for the door, Anna heard hooves at the cave mouth. When Bustian was on his feet before the sound fully reached her, a low growl starting in his chest. Anna set down the hammer and turned. A rider stood dark against the bright entrance. For one instant, her whole body tightened. Then the figure moved forward and resolved into Mr. Davies with a mule behind him. He dismounted slowly, looking around the cavern as his eyes adjusted. The sheep pen caught his gaze first, then the stacked wood, then the barrel under the dripping wall, then, at last, the little log room taking shape in the deep. He did not speak right away. Anna wiped her hands on her apron. "You found it. You gave fair directions." He loosened the sacks from the mule. "Flour, beans, salt, coffee." He hesitated. "A little extra lamp oil." She looked at him. "I didn't order lamp oil." "No," he said. "Oh, you didn't." The silence after that was not awkward. It was measuring. Mr. Davies turned toward the back and listened. Plink, plink. His brow lifted a little. "So the rock does give something up. Only if asked the right way." He glanced back at her then, saw the sawdust caught in her hair, the dirt on her cuffs, the new thickness in her forearms, the fact that she was thinner in the face and steadier in the eyes than when she had walked into the auction hall. "Payment can wait," he said. Anna straightened. "I said I'd pay after the lambs. And I said it can wait. I don't want charity." Mr. Davies gave a dry breath that was almost a laugh. Then don't call it that. He tied the empty lead rope to his saddle. Call it a man liking his odds better after seeing the place. When he left, the mule's hoofbeats faded slowly down the slope. Anna stood in the cave mouth until the sound was gone. That night she cooked beans in her skillet and drank coffee so weak it barely stained the water. Yet it tasted richer than any feast she could remember. Bustian lay by the half-built wall of the cabin, paws crossed, watching firelight shift over the ceiling. Someone finally looked properly, she murmured. Bustian thumped his tail once. The weather worsened. Cold came harder after that, not only in the mornings, but in the afternoons too, a mean dry cold that slipped under cuffs and sat in the joints. Anna hurried the cabin toward completion. She roofed it low to hold heat. She hung a thick piece of canvas behind the rough plank door to stop drafts, and she laid wool and brush under the bed frame to keep the cold from climbing up through the floor. Still, none of it would matter without fire. A pit fire would choke her out. Smoke would gather under the low roof and smother the room before midnight. She needed a stove, and she did not have one. She turned over every scrap she owned before she found the pieces that might become one. An old iron pot with a cracked rim among her husband's things. 2 bent sheets of patch metal, wire, clay, and stone. It was not enough for a proper iron stove. It would have to become something uglier and smarter. Anna built the hearth in the rear corner on a base of flat rock. Clay thickened the walls. Stone gave it shape. The broken pot became the hot core of the firebox, set into the structure where it could take the worst of the heat. And she hammered the metal flat and curled it into pipe as best she could, sealing edges with wet clay and wire. The venting was the true problem. Smoke had to go somewhere, and the cave ceiling offered no kindness at first glance. But Anna had noticed a narrow fissure high above, little more than a dark seam splitting the stone. She had watched tiny drafts stir there on colder mornings. If it ran to the surface, it could draw. If it did not, she would fill the cabin with smoke and ruin half the work already done. She built a scaffold out of spare poles, climbed it with the pipe balanced against her shoulder, and braced herself 20 feet above the floor, while Bustian paced below in anxious circles. From up there, the cave felt even larger, the lanterns smaller, the sheep-like pale stones shifting in their pen. Don't look down, she muttered to herself. Bustian whined. I know. She wedged the top end of the pipe into the fissure and climbed down with shaking legs. Then she carried a coal from the fire and laid kindling inside the crude stove. The flame caught. For one breathless second, nothing happened. Then smoke rolled back out of the firebox in a gray punch, filling the cabin at once. Anna coughed, lunged forward, and smothered the flame with sand. Her eyes streamed. Clay walls, fresh chinking, raw wood, all of it caught the smell of failure. Bustian barked from outside the doorway. Anna bent forward with her hands on her knees, coughing until her ribs hurt. When the worst of it passed, she sat right there on the floor and stared at the blackened hearth. It would have been easy to call it done, and easy to say a cave could not be made into a house, only borrowed as one. Instead, she looked upward again. The draw was weak. The pipe was too short. Heat had nowhere to catch and climb. The next morning, she hauled herself back up the scaffold with another section fashioned from hammered tin, sealed the joints more carefully, and pushed the length higher into the crack until the top vanished from sight. She lit the fire again. This time the smoke lingered only a moment. Then it pulled upward, thin and steady, and disappeared into the stone. Heat began to gather inside the little room. Not much at first. A hush of warmth against her shins. then more. Enough that the cold edge in the air lost its teeth. Anna stood very still. Bustian walked in, sniffed once, then turned in a circle and lay down near the doorway with a sigh so deep it sounded like approval. By nightfall, the cabin held a clean, dry warmth that seemed almost impossible in the heart of the cave. Anna touched the stove's clay side with the back of her fingers and smiled without meaning to. She slept there for the first time that night, on a narrow cot with a blanket pulled to her chin and the glow of coals breathing red through the stove mouth. Outside the little cabin, the larger cavern remained cold and dim and ancient, but here, inside walls she had raised herself, winter had finally been pushed back by more than hope. The attack came 2 nights later. Bustian heard it first. His bark hit the cabin wall like thrown stones, sharp and savage, not his warning bark from the road, not his uncertain growl at strangers. Well, this was something else. Anna came off the cot already moving. She snatched the lantern, shoved open the door, and ran into the main chamber barefoot on cold ground. The sheep were in chaos, crashing hard against the far side of the pen, eyes white, bodies packed tight. At the cave mouth, just beyond the edge of moonlight, 2 green eyes hung in the dark. Low to the ground. Still. Watching. A cougar. Anna's rifle leaned inside the cabin, but she did not go for it. The cave twisted sound and distance. A bad shot in the dark might not drive the animal off. It might bring it forward. The cat shifted one shoulder. Bustian stood between it and the flock, teeth bared, barking himself raw. Anna grabbed the first thing near her hands. 2 iron skillets from the peg outside the cabin door. She did not run toward the animal, yet she ran deeper into the cave. Then she turned and slammed the skillets together with all the force in her body. The sound that burst out was monstrous. It hit the walls, doubled, broke, came back larger. Metal against metal became a ripping roar that seemed to rise from every side at once. Anna struck them again, and again, and again. The cave turned each blow into something wild and wrong, some giant unseen thing waking in the rock. The green eyes vanished. Bustian lunged forward, barking into the dark, but the shape was already gone. Anna kept pounding the pans together until her arms nearly failed her. Only then did she lower them, breathing hard, the ringing so strong in her ears she could not hear the sheep for a moment. When sound returned, the flock was still alive, frightened, crowded, trembling, but alive. But Bustian came back first, chest heaving, tail stiff, every line of him still ready to fight. Anna dropped to one knee and gripped the thick fur at his neck with both hands. "Good dog," she said, voice shaking now that the danger had passed. Good dog." He licked once at her wrist and turned back toward the entrance, still guarding. That night, she did not sleep much. She sat by the stove with the rifle across her knees and listened to the cave settle around her. The attack had proved something she already half knew. This place could protect, but only if she kept learning how it wanted to be used. The next afternoon, hooves sounded at the cave again. Bustian barked once, low and hard. Anna stepped out of the cabin and saw her father-in-law dismounting in a heavy wool coat, the sort bought by a man who had never worried whether winter would reach him. He stood at the mouth of the cave first, as if reluctant to come farther in, then walked a few paces inside and stopped. His eyes moved everywhere. The sheep pen, the stacked wood, the barrel, the little cabin with smoke rising into invisible stone. The expression on his face was difficult to name. He had come expecting disorder. He had found order made without him. "I was nearby," he said. Anna said nothing. He brushed a speck of dust from his sleeve. "Thought I might see whether hardship had finally introduced you to reason." Bustian moved to Anna's side and stood there without a sound. Mr. Hemlock noticed the dog, then looked past him. "This is no place for decent people. It keeps the weather off." He gave a short laugh with no warmth in it. "A burrow keeps weather off. So does a ditch." Anna folded her arms. "Then it is fortunate I paid for it." His gaze sharpened. "I made you an offer once. I'll make it again. 20 for the land. 20 more for the trouble you've put yourself through. Take it and go somewhere fit to be seen." There it was. Not concern, not regret. Erasure. He could not bear the fact that she had made something stand where he had expected collapse. "The land is not for sale," Anna said. His jaw worked once. "Pride is expensive. So is underestimating people." That hit. She saw it in the tiny shift at the corner of his mouth. For a moment he looked beyond her toward the flock. The lambs had grown strong under cave shelter. Any fool could see it. So could he. That, more than the refusal, seemed to harden him. "When winter closes its hand," he said, "you'll learn what a bad bargain looks like." He turned and strode back toward his horse. Anna watched until he disappeared beyond the scrub. Something remained unsettled after he left. The cave felt no different, yet she moved through the rest of the afternoon with the sensation of a splinter under the skin. She checked the lashings on the pen. Restacked wood. Examined the barrier at the cave mouth. At dusk she found the cut rope. It hung from the far side of the sheep pen, cleanly severed, not worn through, not loosened by strain. Cut. Deliberate. A neat, cruel slice where one hard tug in the night might have opened enough space for panic and ruin. Anna stood staring at it until the anger in her rose hot enough to burn away surprise. Bustian sniffed the rope end, then lifted his head toward the cave mouth with a low growl. She crouched, fingers tight around the frayed strands. Mr. Hemlock had said he would not help her. He had not said he would leave her be. Anna replaced the rope with chain where she could, and doubled every other fastening with fresh knots pulled so tight her knuckles whitened. Then she braced the gate with a beam heavier than before, and set a line of tin scraps near the weak side of the pen, where any disturbance would clatter loud enough to wake the dead. By the time she finished, the sky outside had turned the color of old iron. No stars came out. The air itself felt wrong, not moving, but waiting. Cold had thickened into something heavier than temperature, something that pressed against the cave mouth long before the first flakes showed. Anna stepped outside once before dark and looked west. The horizon had vanished into a wall of pale gray. When she came back in, she brought twice the firewood she had planned, 3 extra sacks of feed, and every tool she could not afford to lose. She set the wooden barrier across the lower mouth of the cave and checked it twice. Then she stood in the center of the chamber listening. Nothing yet. Only the sheep shifting. The faint drip at the barrel. Bustian's nails on the packed earth. Still, every instinct in her said the same thing. Something large was coming. She closed the cabin door, fed the stove another split log, and sat awake beside the fire while the first snow began to hiss against the outer dark. By midnight, the hiss had become a roar. Snow drove hard against the cave mouth, was not falling so much as flying sideways in long white sheets. Wind pushed at the wooden barrier with a heavy, living force, making the planks groan in their braces. Inside the cabin, The stove glowed deep orange, the clay sides holding heat like banked sunlight. But even there, Anna could feel the storm's pressure in the air. Bustian did not sleep. He lay near the door with his head up, ears shifting at every change in sound. Now and then he gave a low rumble in his chest, not at any one thing, but at the presence of the blizzard itself, as if it were an animal outside trying to nose its way in. Anna fed the stove another log and listened. The cave changed the storm. That was the first thing she understood as the hours passed. Outside, the wind screamed sharp and wild. Inside, the sound came to her blunted and vast, at a deep rolling violence softened by rock. The stone held against it. The cave did not shake. It did not rattle apart. It absorbed the blizzard and answered with silence and weight. That was why she had chosen this place, though she had not known all the words for it at the auction. Not because it was pretty, not because it was easy, because the earth itself stood with her here. When dawn should have come, the cave remained dim as dusk. Snow had piled high against the barrier, sealing away most of the outer light. Anna left the cabin, lantern in hand, and moved through the main chamber while the sheep stirred in their pen. Their breath hung pale in the cold air. They were nervous, but not frantic. The temperature had dropped, yes, but not to the killing cold that would be raging in the open. She checked the gate first, then the water barrel. The drip still came, slow and steady, the sound almost swallowed by the storm. That small plink struck her harder than the wind did. Everything she had built was being tested at once now. The pen, the stove, the barrier, the barrel, the cave itself. All the hours that had looked so strange to other people had narrowed down to this one truth. Did it hold or not? The first day passed in simple tasks that felt enormous because of what waited outside them. Feed the sheep. Check the cabin seams. Clear the drift building inside the barrier. Melt a little extra snow in a pot only to compare it against the clean cave water and feel thankful all over again. Eat beans. Drink weak coffee. Listen. She did not waste motion. She did not waste wood. When fear rose in her chest, she gave it work to do. On the second day, the wind worsened. It came in long, hammering bursts now, hard enough that fine powder hissed through cracks around the barrier and spread in white lines across the cave floor. Anna tied a scarf over her nose and mouth and shoveled the drift back from the entrance 3 times before noon. Bustian stayed close enough that his fur brushed her skirt whenever she bent. At one point, a gust struck so violently that the barrier boomed against its supports. The sheep jolted in their pen. Anna dropped the shovel, grabbed the brace beam with both hands, and held it while the wind leaned there like a giant shoulder. It passed. The beam stayed true. She stood breathing hard, cheek pressed to the cold wood, and felt a strange, fierce calm move through her. "Not today," she said to the storm. Bustian barked once as if in agreement. By the third night, the blizzard had become something beyond time. There was no world left outside the cave, only whiteness and sound. The cabin had shrunk into the center of her life, its stove heat making a small circle of certainty against all that force. Anna sat on the cot with her hands wrapped around a tin cup and looked at the glow through the stove mouth while Bustian slept at last, paws twitching now and then in dreams. Her husband came back to her then, not as he had looked at the end, fevered and fading, but on an older day under a clean sky, reins loose in one hand as he pointed toward the mesa and said, "Dry cave. Good one." She had not understood that he had given her a map. not to comfort, not to a future they would share. To survival. The thought hurt. Then, slowly, as it steadied her, there were many kinds of inheritance. Some came in purses of coins handed over coldly in a doorway. Some came in a remembered sentence that only proved its worth when all other doors had shut. On the morning of the fourth day, the storm broke. Not all at once. The wind thinned first, losing its scream and falling to a long, tired moan. Then even that faded until there was almost nothing. The silence afterward was enormous. Anna stood in the main cavern listening to it. No battering snow, no hammering gusts. Only the faint shift of sheep, the drip at the barrel, the soft pop inside the stove. Bustian rose, stretched, and looked toward the cave mouth. "It's done," Anna said quietly. But the work was not. Snow had packed hard against the barrier, sealing them in. And it took hours of shoveling to open a path wide enough to force the lower planks loose and squeeze through the gap. When at last she stepped outside, the light struck her eyes so bright she had to turn her face aside. The world had been erased and written over in white. Drifts rose higher than the fence posts she had set outside. Brush had vanished. The land's usual roughness was gone under smooth curves and hard, glittering ridges shaped by wind. The cold bit clean and merciless into her lungs. The sky overhead was a hard, pale blue that looked almost brittle. Anna stood there with the shovel in both hands and stared. It was beautiful. It was terrible. And she was standing in it alive. She cleared a narrow track from the cave entrance to the wood stack she had banked under an overhang, and she widened the path enough for the sheep to reach a small sheltered patch near the mouth on calmer hours. She marked the edges with poles so she would not lose the trail if fresh snow came. Every motion had to be deliberate. One misstep into a drift or hidden hollow could cost a twisted ankle, and out here alone that might be as dangerous as hunger. The cave behind her felt less like shelter now and more like a fact. Solid, proven, no one's theory anymore. A week passed in hard white stillness. Then Mr. Hemlock came. Anna saw him first as a dark, moving shape beyond the drifts, a rider picking his way toward the mesa with the slow, awkward caution of a man who no longer trusted the land under his horse. Bustian stiffened beside her, but did not bark. He only watched. When the horse finally reached the entrance, Mr. Van Hemlock looked older than he had a week before the storm. Not by years exactly, but by damage. His coat was stained. His face had hollowed. Even the set of his shoulders had changed, as if he were carrying weight he could neither shift nor deny. His eyes went first to the sheep, all alive, then to the cleared path, the wood stack, the smoke rising faintly from the hidden fissure above, the barrier, the order. Finally to Anna herself. She stood in her work coat with chapped hands and a scarf at her throat, shovel in one hand, calm as stone. "You're alive," he said. "I am." His gaze moved back to the flock again, and something in his face tightened. For once, he did not come straight to the point. He looked out across the white land behind him before speaking, as if the words shamed him. "We lost near half," he said, but Anna said nothing. The north pasture barn roof gave way on the second night. His mouth pulled tight. Drifts took the lower lot. We dug until our hands bled and still couldn't reach them in time. The admission hung in the air between them, stiff and bare. This was the man who had stood in a warm hall and cut her loose with a purse of coins. Now he stood before the cave she had built into a refuge and told her his wealth had failed him. Bustian moved one step forward and sat, watchful. Mr. Hemlock looked at the dog, then at Anna again. You were fortunate. The words came out thin. Anna could have answered that fortune had little to do with 4 months of labor and thought. She could have told him luck did not build pens, carve gutters, raise walls, or hold beams against the wind. She did not. Instead, she said, the cave kept what mattered out of the open. He looked behind her toward the dim shelter of stone. I'll buy it. There it was again. That old reflex. Not apology, not praise. Ownership. He pressed on before she could speak. The land, the flock, the improvements. Name your price. Anna almost laughed, not from amusement, but from the tired wonder of seeing a man remain himself even at the edge of humiliation. It is not for sale. His jaw hardened. Everyone sells. No, Anna said. Everyone doesn't. The wind moved lightly over the crusted snow. Somewhere inside the cave, one lamb bleated. Mr. Hemlock stared at her for a long moment. There was anger in him, pride, the ache of loss. But beneath all of it now was something she had never once seen there before. Recognition. Not of her grief. Not of her place in the family. Not of her ability. Of her right to stand where she stood. He looked away first. Then he gathered the reins. You've made a strange thing work. Anna rested both hands on the shovel handle. It works because I listened to it. He gave one small nod, almost against his will, and turned the horse. She watched him ride back across the drifts, smaller with each careful step, until white distance took him. Only then did she let out the breath she had been holding. Bustian leaned against her knee. Well, she murmured, scratching behind his ear. That took long enough. The dog's tail thumped against the packed snow. By the time the roads opened enough for travel, the story had already outrun her. When Anna finally made the trip into town, she came with a small sleigh behind her mule and 2 sturdy lambs ready for sale. Yet the streets were still edged with dirty snow, and the boardwalks creaked under boots and thaw. Men gathered around the stove in Mr. Davies's store fell quiet when she stepped in, but not with the old sort of silence. That one had been sharp. This one listened. Mr. Davies looked up, took in the lambs outside, then looked back at her face. Heard your place came through clean, he said. We came through, Anna answered. One of the men by the stove, a rancher who had once laughed at the auction, shifted his weight and cleared his throat. You lose any? No. He gave a low whistle he tried to hide in his beard. Mr. Davies came around the counter and stood by the door, peering out at the lambs. Good legs on them, he said. Soundbacks too. He named a fair price, then added, could take more in spring, if the rest look like these. Anna nodded once. The rancher by the stove spoke again, more carefully this time. That cave of yours keeps the cold off that well? Anna looked at him. Better than pride does. A few men laughed at that, but not cruelly. Even the rancher gave a short grin and tipped his head as if accepting the blow. Mr. Davies counted the money into her hand. Real money now. Not severance. Not pity. Earnings. He added her supplies to the counter one by one as she asked for them. Flour, sugar, coffee. More nails. A proper lantern. Good wool cloth. When she hesitated over a mattress tick, he said, Take it. You've earned softer sleep than boards. No one in the room argued. Respect had not arrived with trumpets. It came the way weather changed on the plains, quietly, until suddenly the whole horizon looked different. The walk home that day felt lighter than any she had taken since the auction, though her sled was heavier, coins in her pocket, supplies at her back. Bustian ranging happy through the thawing edges of snow. She had not won by becoming someone else. She had won by staying when they expected her to break. Spring came late and muddy. Snow withdrew in ugly gray ridges first, then in shining streams that ran hard down the gullies. The creek swelled and shouted over stone. Outside the cave mouth, green returned in cautious patches. Inside, the barrel filled faster than ever. The lambs kicked and bounded in the pen, their soft cries brightening the cavern. Anna widened the enclosure, repaired what winter had worn, and broke a small patch of ground near the southern edge of the mesa for root vegetables. People began to stop by. Not many, not often, but enough. A neighbor wanting to buy 2 ewes. A passing ranch hand asking, in a voice he tried to keep casual, how deep the cave ran. A woman from town with a basket of yeast cakes who said she had come only because she happened to be nearby, though they both knew that was not true. Anna did not become suddenly social. She did not need to. But she learned the difference between being alone and being cast out. The first was sometimes peaceful. The second no longer applied. One afternoon in late spring, Mr. Davies himself rode out with coffee beans and a folded catalog of tools, and he stood at the cave mouth with his hands hooked in his vest and looked around as if the place had become a landmark he was still adjusting to. "You planning to stay in there always?" he asked. Anna glanced back at the cabin, the pen, the neat woodpile, the path of light reaching in from the entrance. "For now," he nodded. "Then I suppose folks will go on saying you live in a hole." Anna lifted one shoulder. "Let them." Mr. Davies smiled. "Hard to mock a hole that turns a profit." When he left, she stood watching the dust settle behind him. That evening, the sky outside the cave opened into bands of rose and gold. The last light reached deep enough to warm the stone near the mouth, while the inner cavern stayed cool and shadowed. Anna sat on the bench she had built beside the cabin wall. Bustian rested his head on her knee, yet the sheep shifted softly behind their gate. From the small stovepipe hidden in the fissure above, the faintest thread of smoke rose and vanished into the evening air. She looked at what surrounded her. The rough cabin tucked into the ancient rock, the water barrel catching what the stone surrendered, the pen built with blistered hands, the dog who had kept watch through every lonely night, and beyond the cave mouth, the land people had laughed at. It no longer looked useless. It looked understood. That was the difference. Most people wanted land to obey them, to flatten itself, feed them, answer quickly, prove its value in ways they already recognized. This place had never offered that. It had asked to be read properly, to be respected for what it was, not cursed for what it was not. So had she, while Anna bent and rubbed Bustian's ear. The dog sighed, content. In the little window of the cabin, lantern light glowed warm against the deepening dusk. It was not grand, not the kind of light anyone in town would have once envied, but it was steady. It belonged to no one else. When her husband died, other people had decided what remained of her life. A burden, a widow, a woman to be handed a purse and turned away. They had mistaken loss for weakness, silence for surrender, need for smallness. They were wrong. The cave had proved it to them first. Time would prove it to everyone else. As the last color faded from the mouth of the cave and evening settled gently around her, Anna sat in the home they had mocked and felt no need to answer any of them again. The land had already spoken for her.